Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we're going to be studying Joshua chapter 5. It's a very interesting chapter. There's a lot going on here that points forward to the New Testament, and then at the very end we're going to have a look at a very special character that appears throughout the Old Testament and of course into the New Testament, but we'll get to that when we arrive at those passages. So let's start off in verse 1. It says, "And it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that Jehovah had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel, until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was there spirit in them any more, because of the children of Israel." So what you have here is, just like the crossing of the Red Sea, the knowledge that the Israelites are passing over the Jordan River with the water drying up, and it's this broad pathway that they have where the water goes all the way up to this town upriver, and then all the way down the water just is gone all the way down to the Dead Sea. You have a little bit less than 2 million, because some people stayed behind, but you have over 1 million people that are crossing the Jordan River to come into the land for the purpose of conquering. And these people know that's why Israel is there. They are aware of Israel's story, and when they see the power of God, because remember, Moses had God with him, but Moses is gone now, and Joshua is now the leader, and there was no demonstration that God was with Joshua the way that he was with Moses until the crossing of the Jordan. And now that you have the crossing of the Jordan, and very much like the Red Sea, going across, you have God with Joshua demonstrated. The people of the Promised Land, the wicked nations that live there, they are terrified. They have no fighting spirit left in them because they know that their days are numbered. They know that what happened to Og, king of Bashan, and all of the nations that have come up against Israel at this point have lost, because Jehovah is with the Israelite nation. They know that Jehovah is a real God. They know what he can do. And so they are terrified of this incursion that's coming in, and they have a right to be. But they should have done what was right and what was good, and not been wicked. And then they wouldn't be facing this kind of thing. So verse 2, it says, "And at that time Jehovah said unto Joshua, Make sharp knives, and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time. And Joshua made him sharp knives, and circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise. All the people that came out of Egypt that were males, even all the males of war, died in the wilderness by the way after they came out of Egypt. And all the people that came out were circumcised, but all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised." So a lot of things going on here. First of all, you have this coming out of Egypt. The law was they had to be circumcised, but as they were wandering in the wilderness, they did not participate in that practice. And so all of the people that had come out of Egypt who had been circumcised, they're all dead. And the next generation who was born after they had come out of Egypt, none of them were circumcised. And circumcision was a sign that they were of the children of Israel. So they had to have that circumcision to be considered clean. And so before they ever go on this conquest, they are circumcised. Now I want you to understand what's going on here. You have the crossing of the Jordan, which again is a type pointing forward to the New Testament. It is associated with baptism. It is associated with circumcision. It is associated with cleanliness. And so when we look at the types, here you have not only an iteration of the type of baptism, crossing the Jordan River, but you also have an association with circumcision, where we look in places like Colossians 2:11 through 13, where the circumcision made without hands is, of course, baptism. It's the cutting away of the filth of the flesh and a renewal of the spirit. And so, again, these symbols point forward to the things going on with the church. Another thing that is important to point out, though, is that these are typifying the history that the church was going to go through. So you have the crossing of the Red Sea, where you have a death, burial, and a resurrection, where they become a new nation, and that's essentially looking at the beginning of the church. And then you have this 40 years of wandering that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 10, where they were receiving the law, and then they only receive the law at that time. The rest of the Old Testament doesn't get written yet. And then after they while they're in the wilderness, they're also receiving manna from heaven. And then when they get here to the crossing of the Jordan, they go through a flood, this water, and then they come out on the other side, and they have entered into the promised land, and they are supposed to go forth and conquer. And we're going to see that the manna stops, and that's an important thing to talk about. But the timing of the stopping is also important as it relates to the New Testament and the receiving of the text of the New Testament, the inspired word. And I'll go into that in just a little bit. So, all right, it says, verse 6, "For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness, till all the people that were men of war, which came out of Egypt, were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of Jehovah, unto whom Jehovah sware that he would not show them the land." And the land is so important, so pay attention when it talks about the land, because that feeds into this idea of the new earth, "which Jehovah sware unto their fathers that he would give us, a land that flows with milk and honey." So again, that association with the land, the earth, the promised land, the flowing with milk and honey, all of that ties into what's going on in the New Testament. It says, "And their children whom he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not circumcised them by the way. And it came to pass, when they had done circumcising all the people, that they abode in their place in the camp until they were whole." So they do the circumcision. They're in this place called Gilgal, and they're there waiting until everybody heals up from the circumcision, because a lot of these people that were circumcised are adults, and it's a painful process. And so they wait here, and they don't start in on their conquest until after everybody is healed. Now, look at this. Verse 9, "And Jehovah said unto Joshua, This day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day." So that word Gilgal means rolled away. Look at what we're seeing here. Look at the parallel. The rolling away of the stone that was in front of the grave, of the tomb of Christ. The rolling away of our sins in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. The rolling away of all of our uncleanness. All of this is tied in to what's going on here. And then look at what he ties it to. He says Egypt. Over and over and over again, we're going to see this hearkening back to Egypt and the coming out of slavery. And then we're going to see in the New Testament that the parallel is that Judaism is the new Egypt. Judaism and the things that they taught and the way that they acted, the slavery that they endured under that system because of their sin, not because of the uncleanness of the law or the imperfection of the law, but because of their sin. And then the way that they persecute the church, you see this parallel of the church coming out of that through a flood. And what does the flood represent? The flood represents the flood of an army. We'll see this in the book of Revelation, where that flood comes in and takes out the wicked nation. Takes out, just like the chariots crossing the Red Sea, when they tried to follow, they were destroyed. And then the nation of Israel comes up on the other side, and they're free. Here they're hearkening back to that as they cross over the Jordan River. They come through the flood unscathed by the waters. And when they come up on the other side, they're in the promised land. Well, that's the same thing the church did. The church passed through the flood of the incoming Roman army that destroyed the Jews. And then when the flood was over with, when they had passed through, then the church came out on the other side into their promised land, into their new heavens and their new earth, on the other side where there was no more Egypt. There was no more spiritual Egypt. There was no more spiritual Sodom. The Jews had been taken out of the way, and the church was free to go out and conquer this new land for the cause of Christ, and that was the spreading of the gospel. So, all right, continuing on. Verse 10, And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. So here's an interesting little tidbit. They are crossing over at the beginning of a new year. For the Jews, for the Israelites, this is a new year for them. And when they cross over, they are circumcised at the beginning of the year. They wait there in Gilgal. They observe the Passover there on the 14th day of the month while they're right there before Jericho. So they keep all of this before they begin the conquering. Note again the parallel looking at what the church dealt with. You have Jesus was the Passover, and you have this looking at a new time, a new day, and the beginning of new things. All of it just like we see here with Joshua. The parallels are unimaginably precise. And that's one of the things that I will never be convinced that the Bible is just something written by man, because of the precision between what we see in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It just meshes together so well, so perfectly, that it had to have a divine origin. And I will never be convinced that God does not exist, that God did not write the Bible. I think that anybody who comes to this level of understanding of how well the Old Testament and the New Testament mesh like this, the type-anti-type relationship is so powerful that anybody that comes to that level of understanding, they can never not believe that God is real. Now, they might be rebellious against him for other reasons, but they will never not believe that God is real. Alright, now here's where we get into the whole manna thing. It says, And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So, we see in the New Testament that the manna is associated with the gospel. That Jesus says that I am bringing to you the bread of life. He makes a direct comparison between the manna and the things that he was teaching. And when we look at what's going on here, you have the 41 years that they've left Egypt and are out in the wilderness. And remember, they camped for a year at Sinai, receiving the law. And then they wandered for 40 years because of their unbelief. And then during that time, Moses is writing down the first 5 books. And then they're receiving manna this whole time that they're in the wilderness. And then they cross the Jordan and they receive manna for just a little bit longer. Just a little bit more manna for a few more days. And then when they finally are able to partake of the bounty of the land, the manna stops. Christianity was exactly the same way. From the time that Christ was crucified to the time that we get up to the so-called crossing of the Jordan, where the flood comes in as the Roman army and takes out the Jews during the Jewish war, we have the bulk of the New Testament is delivered. But then after we get to the other side of that flood, we get just a little bit more. We get John's 4 letters with his name on it. Revelation was written beforehand, but the 4 letters that have John's name, John 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and then the book of Jude, all written after, just a little bit more of the New Testament that came after that flood, and then it stops. Very shortly after the war between the Jews and the Romans. And again, there's this parallel that is unimaginably precise in that. And so you have them here eating the fruit of the land. They're eating the corn that was already there. And they did not eat manna anymore. They ate from the land of Canaan from that day forward. And now we get to the last three verses. And the last three verses are, for me, incredibly powerful in dealing with the identity of the angel of the Lord, who I believe is God the Son, that Jesus Christ is God, not denying that at all. He is absolutely part of the Trinity, part of the Godhead, which I think is the more biblical term. But he is also Michael, the archangel, the number one messenger from God the Father. And I think we see him over and over and over again. We saw him in the burning bush. We saw him in Numbers 22 through 24 when we were dealing with Balaam. Over and over and over again, we see the angel of the Lord. And here, the angel of the Lord is going to appear to Joshua. And we're going to see some properties of him that ties him in to what we see in the book of Daniel and what we see in the book of Revelation. The idea of this sword, and that he is the captain of the hosts of heaven. And I think without a doubt that this is Jesus, pre-incarnate, before he's born of Mary. But the key here is watch what happens with Joshua when Joshua sees him. Verse 13, I'm just going to read through this. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Are you for us, or are you for our adversaries? And he said, No, but as the captain of the host of Jehovah am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and said unto him, What says my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of Jehovah's host said unto Joshua, Loose your shoe from off your foot, for the place whereon you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. Now, first of all, we have something very similar to the burning bush. Who spoke to Moses out of the burning bush? God did. What did God tell Moses to do? Take your sandals off your feet, because the ground on which you stand is holy. Moses was in the presence of God, and he was told to remove his sandals, because being in the presence of God, the world, the earth where he was standing was holy ground. Joshua was told the same thing. Remove your sandals. The place where you stand is holy. Why? Because he was standing before God. But when we look at this person has a sword in his hand, and he is the captain of the host. He is the leader of all of the angels. He is the archangel of the host of Jehovah. There's only ever one talked about. It's one of the reasons that the book of Enoch is problematic, is because it contradicts this idea of there only being one archangel. The book of Enoch just makes stuff up because somebody wants to write fantasy about angels. Here you have one captain of the host of Jehovah, and Joshua bends down and worships him. Now, in every other case where we have an angelic being like Gabriel or some other messenger, when somebody tries to worship them, that angel says, No, I'm just a servant like you. Get up. Don't worship me. I'm not worthy of worship. Only God is worthy of worship. When Joshua bows down and worships this captain of the host, he is told, Take your sandals off, because the place where you stand is holy. In other words, this person is saying, I am God, and I accept your worship. There is no doubt in my mind that this is God the Son. Now, the word Michael, the name Michael, is not used here, but when you see the properties of this person, and you see in the book of Genesis, and the book of Exodus, and the book of Numbers, when you get forward into the apocalyptic text, especially like Daniel, where Michael is named, and then you move forward into places like 1 Thessalonians 4, where Jesus is going to return with the voice of the archangel, where you look in Revelation chapter 12, where Michael and his host are fighting against Satan and his host. There is no doubt that Michael is Jesus Christ before he is born of Mary. And that doesn't have to mean that the Jehovah's Witness version of this, where they interpret all of that correctly, that Jesus is Michael, but then they come to the weird conclusion that that means that Jesus is not God. That's not a necessary conclusion. Jesus is absolutely God. He claims it multiple times, demonstrates it multiple times. We see it here throughout the Old Testament multiple times that Jesus is God the Son. But he's also Michael the Archangel. That was his title, that was his name before he was born of Mary. And then when he was human, or while he is human, because he still is, he took on the name Jesus. He took on the name Emmanuel, God with us. And I think it's just super clear here, and I know that people have problems with that, but I think the evidence is just overwhelming of that. Anyway, we have the beginning of the conquest now. They have crossed over. They've taken care of all the preliminaries. They're no longer eating manna. They've all been circumcised. They are ready to go. Next chapter, we're going to deal with the Siege of Jericho and the miraculous beginning of this. And, you know, you think these guys are terrified now. When they hear what happens to Jericho, that these guys don't even do anything but blow some trumpets, that everything that comes along from God being with these guys, they're terrified now. Just hearing the Israelites are crossing the River Jordan. Imagine what they're going to feel when they hear what happens to Jericho. So we'll do that next. Joshua 6 is coming up. Thank you for watching. I look forward to your questions. I know there's going to be some questions about that last little bit with the man standing here that Joshua worships. But I look forward to those questions. We need to talk about it and see what the Bible has to say. So, again, my name is Ernie Lawrence. This has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation, and we'll see you next time.